It's a conversation you can have in front of everybody. Hello, everybody, and welcome to tonight's Candid Candidate Convo. Uh, I am joined by Jake Trier and Jenna Martin, and it's their first times on the show, so they don't know what they're in for. It's my seventh time doing this because I'm in charge. Whatever. I'm Kevin Ham. I'm running for the PSC in District 5. And let's start with Jenna. You are running for HD 52, which is located where?
I'm in Billings. I'm in, about south central, southwestern Billings. So, yeah.
Great. And Jake?
Do you want me to say
Hi, my name's Jake Troyer. I'm running for House District 81 here in Helena, which encompasses both the south side of Helena as well as the North Valley out to Lincoln Road, between the interstate and Green Meadow. And I am running to bring fairness, balance, experience, and common sense back to the legislature.
Great. And let's see, Jake, you have a primary, correct?
Correct. I have a 3-person primary, and
that
means a lot of knocking doors and making phone calls and raising money to let people know that I'm the best candidate in the race because of my experience.
Okay. And Jenna, do you have a primary?
I don't.
Okay.
No, I do not have one. Pretty much a giant chunk of Billings was completely underrepresented or uncontested at all. So I think there's only one primary in the entire county right now. And that was not intentional as far as I know.
Interesting. So I was first introduced to Jenna when I was sent a tweet thread that starts with, and I quote, "Since I wasn't planning on running for office and Rage filed the day before the deadline, I've spent the last few weeks hashing out potential legislation and policy plans. I'd like to share a few with you all now. First up, housing." And that was tweet number 1 of approximately 7,432 tweets.
I think there was 27 in that thread, and that was not planned. That was not planned.
It was awesome. What was fun is I got to share that out with people I have a bunch of people on both sides of the aisle that follow me and interact with me, and it was fun to watch the people on the left go yes, and the people on the right go ah! And it was it's very sort of, these are the things that are there. But as we've gone on in the weeks since you posted that, which was April 12th, how has the reaction been to you about them? About all of those things?
It was crazy because I only got maybe a handful of people that actually commented on my thread personally or reached out to me and had issues on it. Everyone else was like, I like this, but, and then they let me know information. And I was like, great, that's literally what it was for, right? I'm going to share the entire thing. This is what I think we should do, or what ideas I have. Cause it's like, this isn't legislative policy. I'm literally crowdsourcing, like, hey, I would like to do these things. What do you guys think? And a lot of people wrote back and they were like, I like this, but there's this one specific law, and if you were to do this, and this, it might work better. And I was like, perfect. I literally didn't know about that. Let's write it down. So it was really helpful. I only got, some of the people that were upset about it were surprisingly Dems who have been around for a very long time. So the Republicans that I interacted with were very open to discussing a lot of that stuff. There wasn't like, they weren't being mean or rude at all. They're asking a lot about, DMing me a lot about the public lands issues, like what checkerboarding was, and asking about the hunting license, because that was a really big issue that I have, is that where, people that own private land are baiting elk onto their land and then selling that private license to out of state. And elk are not private property. They are a public resource, so that shouldn't be legal alone. So I had a lot of hunters that were contacting me and asking about that and saying they support those policies. So it was kind of fascinating because I expected it to be a very blue likes and red doesn't like, and that wasn't the case at all. A lot of the red were very much active in that conversation and were really open to things and offering suggestions. And then a lot of the blue, of course, were like, awesome. And then the only people that messaged me and were like, you're a stupid little girl, this will never work, you don't know anything about the Constitution, were establishment Dems. from like a long time ago. So I was like,
Mhm.
wow, that wasn't how I thought that was going to go. But it was surprisingly really nice.
I'm glad you're running, Jenna. I'm just gonna put that out there. Like,
Thank
you
you.
stepped up, no one else would, and that's important. So thank you. Not only
Thank
for
you.
me, but for Democrats across the state. Like, it's really, really, really important you're running for this seat. So
I
go get 'em.
appreciate it. I hope that, you know, I'm running against Sherry Essman. And that was kind of an intentional choice when I looked to see who was running where. There was a couple people that I'm like, oh, this is all open. I'll just pick a district. But this one was most competitive, and I have a personal, I don't know
Sure.
if vendetta is the right word, but I definitely chose this district. I love this district. It's like, technically it's the one right connected to my neighborhood. Because someone is running in my neighborhood, but it's like, I know this opponent, I know this district, I love it. We're gonna go there.
And you're just a few houses out, right? Isn't
Yeah,
that
like it's like right next to mine.
Yeah.
And the person who's running in my district lives like walking distance from me.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'll tell you, Jenna, the problems that people have a few houses down outside the district are the same problems people are having inside the district. So
yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm just glad. That's great. I'm glad you stepped up. It's really, really important.
I
Sorry,
I
Deb, I
appreciate
kinda took
it.
over.
It's been really good for you know, I expected to, you know, the first night I was like, oh, I'll just run, because I rage filed. It wasn't thought through at all. This was not a planned thing. So that night I was very upset, and I'm asking my husband, I'm like, what am I doing? Like, am I just I this is just insane. And the next morning I had emails, DMs, just so many people saying, if you need help, you need volunteers, whatever you need, let me know. And it was like, okay, like, we're gonna do this. And after that, like, it's been kind of building this coalition and building this kind of community, and then reaching out around Billings and seeing other candidates are doing the same thing, and it's turned into quite the I'm very happy to be here. It's been a surprising discovery within Billings, so it's been great.
Good. And you can beat Sherry.
That's the goal. Oh, that's the goal.
You can do it.
I'm
Nice.
working on that.
We started off early right away with the spam and chats. Apparently, Mark North decided to create an account pretending to be me, so that's super fun. On YouTube, I'm like, well done, dude. We'll have that moment with you. Oops, wrong chat. So let's dive right into this, because this is fun. I want to go with, we'll do it in order. Let's start with housing. Jenna had posted reestablish the affordable housing ordinances across the state and raise it from 10 to 15%. What's interesting about this is today there was just an article in the IR, which I'm going to call up really quick. That is, Lewis and Clark County experienced 36.5% rise on rents between 2020 and 2022. Let me put some of this into the chat so people can see it. This is actually one of the statements from that, which is the president of the Helena chapter of the Montana Landlords Association, William Staffelt, who owns 23 of Helena's residential units, says he is getting hundreds of applications a day for single open units and has plans to increase rents a whopping 10% to take advantage of the desperation. The question is, what do you plan to do to prevent this kind of opportunistic price gouging, especially with housing, which is an absolute necessity to life?
Well, mine is in the tweet. Troy, do you want to go first?
Yeah.
I'm going to switch to the question so everybody can see it. Go for it.
I think there's a lot of things we need to do. Let's not forget that landlords are also property owners, and pay residential property taxes. So what we need to do to help reduce those costs and increase rents to renters is look at a few different things. But most importantly, I feel that we really need to evaluate our property tax structure in our state. We currently have 15 segments of 16 or 15 property tax segments that can be looked at and reevaluated. Of those 15, one of those is residential property taxes. So like a waterbed, when a tax is removed from one of the segments, it moves to the residential property owners, which impacts both homeowners as well as landlords, which in turn impacts renters. As having been both a renter and a homeowner, I mean, I felt the pain both ways. I see my property taxes increasing every year, as does everybody else. But as a renter, if you can't find a place to live, at some point, your car is going to be the place where you're living. And we need to make sure that this problem, which has been 20 years in the making, is resolved with the 2023 legislature by looking at property taxes to start with. In addition, I feel that we need to really, really focus and increase opportunities such as community land trusts, community home ownership, and also look at ways for homeowners and landowners to look at other ways they can reduce those rents for people and taxes.
Okay. Jetta?
Well, I want to go back to I want to raise that 10% to 15% affordable housing initiative. That's also a very specific number, and that was a specific one because our 10% housing initiative was crushed because Sue Vinton of HD 56 wrote a law that we don't have to do that anymore. Sue owns Vinton Construction, so that wasn't a in good faith law to begin with. So yeah, I want to reestablish that, and I want to raise it because that's the situation we're in right now. We aren't in a situation where we can just do 10%. Like the entire state is in a crisis, so that has to be raised. If it's temporary, then it's temporary, but it has to go up. Second, to kind of add on to what you were saying, Troy,
Jake.
what I would be, or Jake, sorry,
no worries, happens all the time.
I'm sure. What I would like to add on to is I am curious to know, because I don't have this stat, but I'm curious to know how many people are homeowners and how many people are landlords. Because I have no sympathy and anything for landlords. And I know that is not that's not a politically safe thing to say. But what I do care about is if there are people that own one or two properties in addition to their own home, and that is their secondary income. A lot of seniors that do that, they bought houses for their kids when their kids went to college because it made more sense. Their kids moved out and moved on, and they have this secondary house they've been using as income. I'm not upset about that at all. I think that's kind of the case a lot of seniors are in because as inflation has gone up and their income has been, their Social Security and stuff has been consistent, they are in a situation now that without that rental income, they have to go back to work. It's an impossible rock and a hard place for them. But for the people who own 23 properties, no, you don't get to own 23 properties anymore. You can have 3 and maybe 4 if we want to compromise a little bit. You don't get 23 anymore. For the out-of-state corporations who are buying up massive swaths of housing in Billings, you're now taxed at I want to tax them at a very significant amount. And if the conversation is, well, what do they do? Either pay it or sell those houses. That's it. I'm done coddling these corporations and these, massive groups who are like, well, we own 50 properties. What about us? I don't care. There are people freezing to death on the street in Billings. I do not care if you have to sell one of your 20 properties. Figure it out and deal with it. That concern to me is not near as difficult as trying to find a warm place to sleep in 40 below weather. So my priority definitely lies with the people that have no houses, the people that are getting displaced because of, people taking 10% rent increase. That is my priority, and that's where it's going to stay. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different things when it comes to housing, and I'm willing to open to all kinds of suggestions. But when it comes to am I fighting for the person freezing to death or the landlord with their 23 properties? I'm pretty solidly on one side.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I think that between my ideas and your ideas, we can make a real difference.
Yeah, no, that's great experience. That's perfect. All that kind of information, that's great. Let's take something that, let's make something that genuinely works without coddling the group that has been coddled for the last 50 years. I'm not doing it.
Yeah, no, and I didn't want to give the impression that I'm on the side of landlords. I'm on the side of residential property owners, of
There you
which
go.
landlords fall into that.
Exactly. I mean, and there's people that, like, when I first was talking about it, they were like, well, I have like a little hunting cabin in the Nye. It's like, I don't care about your hunting cabin. That's fine.
I'm not worried about what's going on in Nye.
No,
I'm not worried about that.
That's not what we're talking about. So that's fine.
Yeah. No, it's impacting everybody. There's no doubt about it. And we need to have strong voices with good ideas who can write legislation and go get it passed. I mean, that's just how it is. And like I said, you and I together, we got the ideas to go make it happen.
Yeah. Here's another one, and this kind of ties into it. What has each candidate done, and what do they plan to do going forward to support tenant unions in their districts? Do we have tenant unions?
I think I'm frozen.
No, I can see you. You're still moving.
Okay.
I think. Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
I was gonna say I didn't know about tenant unions, but if we have them, then awesome. Gladly support them. I didn't know that was a thing out here, and I don't know anything about it, so I haven't done anything yet to support it. But hell yeah, tenant unions. I'm for that.
Yeah, I mean, this would be similar to what happened in Missoula that they tried to do, correct?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. The question is for you. What are you going to do to make it happen? So.
Well, as someone who used a community land trust to purchase their first home, I 100% support any type of program that helps a home buyer get their family into a home, whether it's community land trust, whether it's more tiny home developments, or whether it's tenant unions. Like, we need to look at every option on the table to solve this crisis that we're having right now. Because like I said, it's been 20 years in the making, and the chickens have come home to roost. And you know who's being hurt? It's not the people making $100 million a year. It's people making $30,000 a year who are trying to feed their kids, pay their bills, and pay their rent or mortgage. And that's who needs to be focused, because that's the vast majority of people who live in Montana. Vast majority. Yeah.
We've got another one. This is from Michael Gustowski. Sorry about that, Michael. I understand that housing is a problem in all of Montana, but what about all the farmland being bought up as well? What are your solutions for that? Who wants to take this one first?
Jenna, here we go.
You want me? I want you to. I want to hear your answer on this. I want to hear it.
As a landowner and homeowner, it's very difficult to tell people that they can't sell their land because that's their land. That being said, we need to have more guidelines and more sideboards for what that means. I mean, does that mean that you're going to sell your farm and it's going to turn into subdivision? Or is it going to turn into smart, affordable housing for people? Let's look at that, talk to people, and work with stakeholders and other organizations to find the best solution. I mean, that's a very interesting question that in an urban part of Montana is not necessarily something that applies to my district. While I will represent the North Valley, it's not really farmland per se. It's more ranching and ranchettes. And I mean, you can't tell someone that they can't sell their land to someone. Yeah. But what you can do is set up some additional sideboards to guide those projects and those sales to a point where everybody benefits, and it's not just going to be turned into just a giant development of $4 million homes. Yeah.
I'm glad. Like, I'm glad. I mean, I wanted to hear your answer because that's kind of the situation we're in here. I mean, Billings my district isn't. We don't have a lot of land. We're city is what it is as far as Montana goes, which doesn't mean that we're not in the. Yeah, I mean, but if we're in state legislature, that hopefully that someone is presenting that bill, to represent their district, and something is coming up, and we're going to have to vote on that. Still want to be knowledgeable on it. But that's a fascinating question. I think it's really complicated, especially when you have a variety of tribes that are still working on the land back movement. Like there's a lot to it.
That's a great point.
there's a lot of billionaires that are just consistently buying up Montana land and then doing nothing with it. They just kind of hold on to it. So they're hoarding it in a way. I don't know what to do about that. I don't like it, but I don't know what to do about that. Yeah, that's a fascinating question. It's a good one.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So, and Michael Guskowski also added, Bill Gates is the #1 owner of farmland in the country right now. Is there any way to limit these billionaires from buying our Montana land? Yeah, it's called laws.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. I don't like it. I don't like that Bill Gates is just buying up Montana farmland, and he isn't doing a lot with it. It's not like he's turning that into subdivisions. So I don't know. I'm also of the belief that billionaires shouldn't exist anyway. So he shouldn't have the ability as one person to just be making that decision and deciding he's going to buy an entire state to himself and then do nothing with it. So, yeah, I'd love to do something about it. I would. Given the opportunity, I will.
Yeah, great. Let's see. Next up, I'm just going through your tweets until other people chime in with stuff. I think it's great, Michael, if you have more stuff that's coming in. But the next one is great because it's energy, so it ties into what I'm running for. It's I'm just going to copy it in for fun so it goes up on the screen. Dun, dun, dun. Montana is one of the top in the nation for potential wind energy, yet we're only using 5% of that potential, which means we don't have a wind farm in Great Falls. We have millions of acres available for solar and are already a quality example of sustainable hydropower. However, we need to go further. And then your proposal, I'll let you go into, Jake, what would you do? And then Jenna, I'm going to let you go into yours, and then I'm going to add some stuff to it.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, first off, yeah, we need to go further. I agree, 100%. I believe in responsible land resource management, and part of that is making sure that we are utilizing our wind to provide energy for people. And we need to make it easier for people and companies to pursue that and build more wind energy providing projects. That's a no-brainer.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Especially in places like Livingston.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with that entirely. I would say, I'm trying to find like my notes on that one. Yeah, so I know that I want the current subsidies for any kind of, all of the subsidies for any kind of fossil fuels to be transferred over to solar, hydro, and wind. The interesting thing with that is people are like, oh, well, there's no subsidies for these things, or there aren't, there are subsidies.
Right.
Just because they're not calling them subsidies, just because it's not in the books as a quote subsidy, does not mean they are not getting free money from the government to help run that operation. So we can call them whatever we want. They're subsidies. And that kind of stuff, those kind of programs transfer over to wind and solar and hydro. Our hydro's pretty good here, but by all means, if we have a successful program, I don't see why we shouldn't be doing more. What the big issue is right now for us is we're having the Northwestern pipeline that's going underneath the Yellowstone.
Right.
And I was in on the Yellowstone County Commission meeting because Northwest has tried to get this permit through a variety of ways and it hasn't worked. And they finally went through the Yellowstone County Commission, and there were the number of people that were at that commission. It was 3 hours of testimony from residents all through Laurel and Southeast Billings. There were people in Miles City that drove up to testify of the results of the 2009 and 2011 leaks and the damage that those did downstream back then. There were people from Helena that came up. They had full out presentations. They had documentation. It was incredible. I was so impressed with my community. I'm sitting at home on Zoom with the kids running around, just screaming and cheering in my computer. And then, of course, the commission approved the pipeline permit in 30 seconds. So that kind of stuff is infuriating. We're at a point now, Kev, you probably know better than all of us, of the kind of obvious and clear corruption that's happening on these commissions at this point. So I don't see how we fix that unless we do something that gives the public a official vote on the end of these things. Because guaranteed, if they were to pass that thing and you were to ask the community members what they wanted and they were to vote, there wasn't a single person in favor of that. So that's kind of one of our big fights here in Billings is basically stuff that Northwestern is doing. They're plowing down trees before they even ask permission. It's pretty infuriating.
Right. So it's been interesting because I've been watching this fight the whole time and very vocal about how I think it's a ridiculous thing that they're even considering it. Northwestern released their carbon neutral by 2050. I don't know if you've seen the reports, Northwestern, but nobody thinks we have until 2050 to get this fixed.
Exactly.
Right.
And carbon neutral doesn't mean carbon non-producing. It is a legal term that is used to obfuscate carbon production in the world and to make people feel better about something, but doesn't actually change whether they're producing pollution. And that fundamentally is a huge issue that needs to be worked on.
Mhm.
When you have a company that's just going to run roughshod over everything and say, well, we're going to do this whether you like it or not, that company needs to be reined in. This is what the PSC should have been doing. The PSC has lacked the cojones to step up and do this. They've lacked the will to do it. They are, in most cases, just willing to rubber stamp whatever Northwestern says, as if that is always the truth. And that's been a problem for years now. And it's gotten to the point where, once again, we have this company going, well, we'd like to have this gas-fired plant, and we're going to take one of the most beautiful rivers in the nation, and we're gonna put a pipeline under it. It'll be fine. Pipelines always break. There is not a pipeline in the world that has not leaked. Not one.
Yeah.
And and fundamentally, you are putting every other resource at risk for something nobody wants, and you're doing it in such a way that you are diverting resources from doing things that would be better.
Well, and what's the name of the act? Because I know it and I can't think of it now. Basically, they have to agree to pay back if there's any damage. They have to agree to pay back at least the fees for the cleanup. What the hell's the act? It's very obvious. It's on top of my tongue. God, I can't think of it now. Anyway, God, it's gonna drive me nuts now. I'm gonna think of it in a second.
We're doing it live, everybody.
Yeah,
just
live. I'm gonna be like, oh, that's it.
But it's the act that requires them to pay for any cleanup that happens, but it doesn't actually pay for the actual damage that they've done in putting it in.
They're living on the, ask for forgiveness rather than permission model, which screws all of us over. I mean, if they have the money to just pay for the cleanup, but they aren't actually paying for the long-standing damage that's going to do, I mean, that obviously is weighted in their favor.
Right. And you end up with this situation where, yes.
Jeff, I hate to interrupt, but I also want to jump in and say that as legislators, we need to provide backstop laws that the PSC has to follow.
Yes.
And,
absolutely.
Regarding this situation, like if we can pass legislation that directs and provides more opportunities, the PSC will have that additional support to stand up against Northwestern Energy when you're elected.
Well, okay. Before we go any further, I appreciate that, and I think that yes, that's probably a worthwhile thing to do. But the fact is, right now, we don't have anybody on the commission that's willing to stand up to Northwestern. We just don't. So even if there is a backstop law, what are they going to do? They're just going to ignore it, or they're going to say, "Oh, we looked at it, and this falls in there." So yes, Jenna.
Well, my question is, like I said, you guys are both like energy. You guys know this stuff specifically. I've been on the protest lines more than the legislative lines in terms of energy. So my question is it possible at a state level for the legislature to write something in there that says, say, if you have public comment and a certain percentage of that public comment is against, you're not allowed to rule for? Like, is that a possibility of something that can say, like, okay, this is a public comment and the commission can rule, but it has to represent the will of the people. And if there are, 99% of the people there vote no, the commission legally cannot vote yes. Is that a possibility?
Yes.
No.
Any
law can be passed by the legislature.
Yeah, any law can be passed, but
is it kids not to play sports because they're trans kids? Then the legislature can write a law providing sideboards for the PSC.
But that wouldn't be for the PSC. She's talking about for like the county commissioners. Could they approve in the specific instance of this?
PSC or county commissioners. Like,
yes.
I'm asking.
Yes, for the PSC directly, yes. For the county commissioners, you run into a different sort of. They've severed that out in different ways. So yes, they can. Would they ever do it? Would it stand up? Would it stand up in the courts? Don't know.
Don't know. Okay.
But there are better ways to do this. One of the better ways is just have people run that don't suck. You know? Okay.
Yeah.
Enough on that. The biggest thing that I want to add to energy really quick before we go on to another question, because we've got two really good ones that are in there. And actually, this kind of ties into Michael, so I'm going to throw his up. It's what are each of your views on potential energy sources, wind, hydro, solar? That's a huge push for electric cars, but can our grid currently handle it? There's two parts to this question. We've kind of touched on the first one, which is that we have wind, hydro, and solar that should be built in Montana. The biggest thing that we should be doing from the PSC side of it, which is where I want to be, and it ties into what the legislature should be doing, is literally saying, hey, focus on these renewable energy sources because they are clean and straightforward, and make it so that we can put them in place. Montana gets over 200 days of direct sunlight, of sunny days a year. And solar production days are not necessarily full sunny days because overcast days still can make solar work. So you end up with somewhere between 300 and 330 days of functional solar per year. Wind, I don't know if you've ever been to Great Falls, but if you have, just put a wind farm there. We can power the world.
So can Billings. We are
only slightly a joke.
Yeah.
And hydro, we've been really good about. We have hydro dams that are in place. In fact, we've actually taken a couple out of service. One of the most recent ones that was taken out of service was Rainbow Dam right outside of Great Falls. That one could be actually redone with better generators put in there, which would be more efficient, allow for more travel, and be safer for the fish and the wildlife that's involved in it, and could produce more. But then the other half of this question, there's a huge push for electric cars, but can our grid currently handle it? I don't know. I don't think it can because I don't know how it is in Billings. Actually, I do. That's a lie. I know how it is all across the state. But the telephone poles or the power poles in town are somewhere between my age and 100 years old. They haven't been replaced. They haven't been retrofit. We still have above ground power in many places. We have random cables that cross roads, that cross all things with high voltage that is very dangerous. And none of that has been upgraded. And that's because since power was deregulated in the late 90s, which was a huge mistake, nobody, even the Republicans that were involved in that, none of them think that was a good idea. They all know they made a mistake. And since that time, we have not had Northwestern step up and actually start rebuilding the infrastructure to make sure that that's safe. And that's definitely one of the things that I want to do as far as the PSC is get them to go out. You know, you have to do an audit on all of your things. One of the biggest fires that they've ever had in California was caused by PG&E not keeping track of transformers that were over a certain age. They were out of their useful life. They failed, and the entire state caught fire. They had $200 billion worth of damage and several lives lost, because they didn't replace transformers that were like $70.
Yeah.
$70. You know, and this is the thing. This is the problem that we have, is we have a bunch of people who keep saying on a right, well, you know, if we don't be nice to Northwestern Energy, they're going to leave. If they don't want to be here, they don't have to be here. We can re-regulate and buy the assets back as Montana.
Absolutely.
If that's going to be the way they're going to do that. Exactly.
Right.
They are allowed to make a profit. They are not guaranteed a profit, and we need to stop acting like everything that they do is okay. And when they screw up, it's going to be passed on to the people of Montana.
Right.
So, no, our grid currently cannot handle it. It needs to be built in. Small micro generation needs to happen throughout the state of Montana. That's going to give us resilience. I don't know if you've heard about this, but we have these things called earthquakes. When major earthquakes happen, like in was it 1938, 1958? What, I think it was 38, but you know, the entire state, the infrastructure was rattled. A lot of it was destroyed. Microgeneration would mean that people in the towns that had these microgenerations happening, their grids may not need to be reconnected to the massive grid right away in order for people to survive. That's a huge need. You know, and this is one of those things where it's like, we're talking about, I got asked a question about, you know, what are we learning from what's happening in the Ukraine? What we're learning is these giant grids that do not have any microgeneration support to them are dangerous, because you're literally putting it to one fail point and the whole thing goes down, and then everybody's without power. And I don't know if you know this, but everything that we do requires power, whether it's store food, make food, live, you know, wash.
A little bit.
Those all require power at some point. So I'm going to kind of let that one wrap up, unless you have anything really specific you want to add to it.
I have something super specific. Do you have anything? You go first.
You go first, Jenna.
Okay.
Jenna, you go first.
So first off, the beginning part of that question, agree with everything you said. Absolutely. The second part of that question with the electric cars, what a great question. I'm so excited. We are skipping this massive point in renewable energy and especially with people in Montana, is that our public transportation offering is completely behind where it should be. And that when it comes to electric cars, like we're talking about individual electric cars, and if we can support that kind of grid, and we haven't even discussed the possibility of public transportation both in our cities and statewide, because that kind of thing automatically changes the entire dynamic of what we're looking at in terms of cars. And if we're able to support a grid right now, we're able to install the grid that supports public transportation on a larger level, including an electric version of that, then we can absolutely start looking at turning that into an individual electric charging stations for individual cars. But I think we need to think bigger. This idea of like, oh, well, what are we going to do about the individual cars? I really do think we need to think a lot bigger than that and look at in terms of what our public transportation needs, because I mean, we do not have the same, or sorry, other states do not have the same problem as us in terms of like, we're one of the biggest states in the country. And to go from Missoula to Billings to go statewide, that takes a lot of energy, that takes a lot of effort. A lot of people don't have that resource. And so being able to install something that is publicly available, that isn't a Greyhound bus at 2:00 in the morning, I think does a lot more for our state too. So I think that needs to be added into that discussion.
Okay.
I want to answer Michael's question specifically.
Which one?
We significantly need to increase opportunities in production from alternative energy resources. I mean, that's a no-brainer. We are a state that has so many opportunities to increase how we're providing energy to people, and we're not taking advantage of it. When I'm elected, along with Jenna, we are going to make sure that we pass laws that make it easier for people to have, use solar power, hydropower, and wind power. And I mean, it's just where regarding the electric cars, Kev, you're right. And Jenna, we need to be prepared. Like, we need to have an infrastructure that can handle that.
Yeah.
I don't know the number of electric cars in Montana currently, but it's going to increase. And we need to be ready to make sure that we can power up those batteries.
Yep.
All right, I'm going to pull us away from an energy discussion and throw up this one from Brandy Swingley. Helena is down a few OBGYNs, which makes getting quality care challenging, especially high-risk care, which all happens out of town. What can we do about the gaps in prenatal care in Montana?
Oof. Boy.
That is a great question.
That's a good question. Oh man, so my training, my master's is in psych, and back when I was in college, I was trying to go into psychiatry. So I applied to med school, I got into med school, and of course there's no residency programs anywhere around Montana. And when it comes to residency, most doctors, when you're trying to get doctors out to an area, they tend to practice within 100 miles of their residency. So before I applied to med school, was all set to go. But before I went, I wanted to do everything I could to establish a psych residency here in Billings. Because we have the psych hospital, we have a magnet hospital, we have everything, right? And I ended up learning that the residency programs in Montana, they're doled out very specifically, and they're doled out based on what makes the most money. So the idea of a psych residency couldn't be touched because a lot of psych patients happen to be uninsured. A lot of them are people who are homeless or people with different kinds of issues that do not have health insurance. So replacing a residency with something like psych was a major issue that wasn't touched. And this was, I want to say, like 10 years ago. I didn't going through this. But recently I started looking into this because of the mental health issue that's been going around. And I found that OBGYN is kind of a similar thing, because there is having children is such a massive expense. It's such an issue that a lot of people are they're putting off having kids. They're going into the city to have kids. They're trying to do all these things around to save them money when having kids. And it's basically lowering the demand for it in certain hospitals. And then it's just kind of this big giant mess. So I don't know how to solve this problem, but I know that as far as the actual residencies, the medical residencies that are offered in our state. Those residencies are so few and far between. They're so far spread out. I am genuinely curious as to if we were to offer more long-term studies, especially, I mean, we have in Billings, we have a magnet hospital. It's one of the best in the nation. There's no reason why we shouldn't be having that kind of stuff out here. If we were to offer these kind of long-term studying for doctors, to pull doctors into our community, both in psych and OBGYN places, so that they can study here, learn our community, and then stay, I wonder if that would help that problem. I don't know if it's an end-all solution by any means, but I really do want to see if we can pull more doctors and more people actively training in our communities, rather than just being assigned here at random, and if that would possibly help.
I want to piggyback on that and just say that we definitely need to look at more medical training facilities in Montana. And I know that we've looked at medical schools coming to Montana, medical schools leaving Montana, medical schools maybe coming to Montana. And it just seems to me that right now, with this shortage, and, my daughter was a high-risk birth, and although she was able to be born in Helena, there are a lot of people who, like Brandy is asking, that go out of town. We need to make sure that we are providing opportunities in our high schools for prenatal education, as well as the opportunities for those high schoolers to move into training facilities within our state, because we just don't have enough. I mean, you think we're having problems in Helena, you should ask someone in Webo what it's like. And
yeah.
I mean, they're going hundreds of miles to have, high-risk births and high-risk care. And we need to open the net and just make it so more people know about these opportunities. We provide funding for people. And we also need to look at retraining some of the workforce who are already in the medical community who want to move to OBGYN work specifically, because that's the question. And provide those opportunities, whether it's through DPHHS, whether it's through the Department of Labor and Industry, or whether it's in conjunction with, other stakeholders. But we have a problem and we need to fix it. And as we're looking at our affordable housing discussion, if you let that stuff go too long, you end up having a huge problem when it comes home to roost.
Yeah.
And go ahead.
I was gonna say, Brandy, I mean, that's a great question. That's a really good question. Like, if I don't feel like that's asked by someone who doesn't have some sort of insight into that issue, like, message us, get a hold of us and say, I mean, if you have ideas, or you are like, research on this subject that you're like, what we should do, message us and let us know, because that's a great question. Absolutely. So I feel like something there. It's a really smart question.
The one thing that I would add to it, which doesn't really solve the problem, it does make some of it a little bit less of an impending thing, is to make sure that telemedicine, telehealth, all of that is available and fully functional and works in places, and that the hospitals in the bigger cities have easy, fast ways to be connected to satellite facilities in the smaller towns. And up until I think it was 2019, if you happened to break your leg just outside of Townsend, you could go to the imaging center there. They could do whatever it is. But the ambulance ride from Townsend to Helena took less time than sending the data from Townsend to Helena, because our infrastructure was so bad.
Jesus Christ.
And that's how we have to deal with all of these things that are, we have to look at a holistic approach for all of it. And there's no solution that I can say that's going to make people come to Helena, that's going to make people come to town. But the other part of it is, we need to make sure that we're regulating the hospitals to a smart extent, so they're not abusing their staff, so that they are not just incentivized to stay, but have a chance, to build their life here, and aren't dealing with, out of control administration, out of control executives, or just, and this is the one that always drives me nuts, billing that's just wrong.
Exactly.
At the hospitals, that sort of stuff. And those are things that the legislature and, should absolutely be stepping into and saying, we won't be having this. So
Right. Although, Kev, I would say that an OBGYN appointment does seem to be more physical than a telehealth appointment could cover. I can't speak to that, but
I can't.
I'm sure my wife can. I'm sure Jenna might be able to. But
yes, I
you're
realize that, but you're dealing with a specialized piece of medicine, and regardless of what the specialized piece of medicine, if you have somebody that can be hands-on there, that is trained to be hands for somebody through telemedicine, you then extend their reach. So that's one of the things that we should be looking at as well. It's not the best solution, but it may be the one that we can get to fastest, which still makes healthcare better. So I'm going to put this one up because no, that's not.
I just want one more thing. I want to say one more thing. I mean, as we saw during the pandemic the last couple of years, the Department of Labor and Industry was really, and Governor Bullock were both really on point with expanding telehealth to people across the state. So we need to continue that. And if that means that we need to codify it even further, then that's what we need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm getting a lot of people that are starting to say really terrible things.
Hey, Karsten.
It's super fun, right?
I don't have any open, so I'm just letting you go through it.
It's fine. Just let me. I'm just reporting them for harassment, bullying, or hate speech.
No.
Super fun.
Karsten is an old friend of mine. She's a very smart person with good ideas.
Oh, I'm not talking about Karsten. So Karsten, okay. I wanted to put up because I did want to make sure that that was clear that Great Falls does have power under the grounds. And do you know why they have power under the grounds at Great Falls? Because they have wind everywhere. It's all the wind. It's the thing. And, that's just what we should be doing everywhere. So
I love that.
So let's see. Oh my gosh.
I don't know what's even happening. I can't even see
exactly. It's
so
ridiculous. There's so many people. I'm just blocking them. It's fine. And I'm getting rid of it. Put there. It's fine. Fine. Like, I'm glad that you hate people, that you need to stop being terrible. Let's see.
Oh my gosh.
What's up next, Kev?
Actually, I did have another one that I wanted to scroll to. That was from Jenna's public education. Switch funding from district-only property tax to statewide property tax distributed per student. Not only would this prevent poorest communities from receiving the least amount of funds, which is outdated, it would also increase funding, as this would add a billionaire properties in extreme rural areas to the funding pool. Talk a little bit more about that.
All right, so that was a suggestion to me by another teacher who I know here, who was talking about the public education, stuff like that. And so that was one that I got a lot of messages on, and people are like, look, this is a good idea, but right now the issue isn't necessarily making a switch from one thing to the next. It is our public education, like how that money is divvied out is overly complex. And so part of that is a matter of like simplifying how that money is doled out, simplifying how that kind of done, because that's absolutely what needs to happen. I mean, right now it's, the richest communities with the richest property taxes are obviously fund the most money to their schools. So if you live in a poor community, your kids are just kind of have to do without. So doing this statewide, absolutely, I think it needs to be statewide property tax and then doled out per student. And that is part of where, like we talked about earlier, Bill Gates owning, acres and acres and acres of farmland. That's still a millionaire property. I don't care if there's a house on it. I want to know what that property tax goes to, because a lot of those are in the middle of nowhere. They aren't even in a school district. So that money doesn't go to anything if it's even being taken into consideration into the public education fund. So yeah, it's interesting. I know that there's someone that brought up the issue of these massive farms that are technically valued at a lot of money, but the farmers are struggling. So they don't have all this disposable income to obviously pay and taxes to this sort of thing. And that would have to be some kind of special consideration. I don't want to destroy, our Montana farms. That's not the point of any of this. So yeah, it's a complicated problem, but that's exactly where I want to go with it. I do not want under any circumstances moving money over to private schools. This is taxpayer dollars, it's public dollars. It needs to stay in public school arena. And these kids should not be doing without. There's no reason why a kid in one neighborhood should be getting half the funding as the kid just across the street from them. So yeah, that's kind of where I was going with it. I got a lot of people that messaged me and DM me, and we talked a lot about like how that's funded within the state. Surprisingly, there is and I shouldn't say surprisingly, but knowing this administration right now, there is so much money that could be going to our schools that has nothing to do with property tax or Montanans. It's literally federal dollars that is given to our state, and Gianforte just doesn't fill out the paperwork. So that right there, free money.
34 million for school lunches. Yeah.
Right.
For years. That doesn't even have to cover 1 year. That's years worth of free school lunches, which is basically a universal basic income for poor people that have kids at that point. I mean, you can really get into that. That's just a simple thing of doing the paperwork, and we aren't even doing it at that level. So yeah, part of it is definitely statewide taxes. Part of it's definitely, helping teachers. I think politicians come in all the time to the neighborhoods where there's a lot of teachers, and they kind of tout jobs. You should elect me because I'm going to bring better jobs. Look, teachers, healthcare workers, social workers, they don't want new jobs. They went to school specifically for that job of being a teacher.
Exactly.
What they want is to be paid and their classrooms to be well funded. So yeah, I could talk about that a lot.
Yeah.
Keep going. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I want. Yeah, you guys jump in because I can finish up the rest of the time just on that.
So I can attest firsthand to the problems we're having in our schools and the hard work our teachers are doing. I've been substituting off and on since October at our local schools here in Helena. And because schools and property taxes are tied together, I feel very comfortable in saying that our property tax system is broken. And I mean, we need to reevaluate and re-examine how taxes are being paid by property owners, whether it's, business equipment or other things in residential, or, there's 15 different segments of property taxes. And when one of those gets changed, it goes to residential homeowners, which they get mad about because they're paying too much, but the money is still going to the schools. So let's reevaluate, look at that system as well as our other taxes system that has been needing to be reformed for years, and the legislature has tried and they're not able to do it yet. But we need to look at all sorts of options around the table for not only reducing, property taxes for homeowners as the other 15 segments, but also making sure that our schools are going to get that money. And maybe we need to look at other revenue sources for schools to get money.
Well, and when I mentioned earlier, taxing out-of-state corporations at a substantial level,
exactly,
that's a lot of money. We can pull that.
That is a lot of money.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that we could tie back to the housing thing. If you are a multinational or even just a national corporation and you own a bunch of houses that are rentals or a bunch of rental units in Montana, you're taxed at a higher rate to help fund the rest of the things that we need to do.
Right.
And if you don't want to own that, this is one of the things that I get really tied up in, because everybody's like, well, they should be allowed to own a home. Yes, you should be. I'm talking about the 3rd, the 4th, the 23rd, whatever. Right. And when it comes down to those things and people do the whole, oh, well, how are you going to make them sell? Tax it. It's artificially inflating the cost of housing for everybody else because they buy up things that they have the resources for that other people need. And because they're doing that, it's made everything artificially high. And I don't know who thought that it was legitimate to have a $600,000 trailer in Missoula, but that's where we're at because of this.
Yeah.
So
we have the power as legislators when we're elected, Jenna, to fix this. And we just got to win, and we got to do it. And that's how it goes. Kev, we got 5.
Yeah, hold on one second. I'm checking something really quick because I want to know what's going on. Yep, this is the person who, it's still another one of the spam things. So I'm going to put up the thing from Karsten because I think it's great. I sub in the poorest district in a Flathead, and they pay the second highest sub pay, and it's still well below McDonald's. Pathetic.
Yeah.
But I understand that the school district is not the one that actually gets to control a lot of that, although I do have some issues with some of the stuff that goes into that. But yeah, that's terrible. We've been getting a lot of trolls tonight, and I think it's very interesting that these people are so tied into all of the things that they think are better for Montana. One of the ones that's been coming up is the statement about what happens when Roe v. Wade is overturned. And we already answered that question. For people who don't know, what it actually is this. The Montana Constitution actually enshrines privacy into
Yes.
it. So we're going to protect the Constitution, as we have done for 50 years, because that stops Roe v. Wade from being repealed in Montana.
That's right.
And
We have bodily autonomy, not only privacy, bodily autonomy built in.
Right.
That's right.
And so while a bunch of people on the right would like nothing more than to make women chattel, we will not stand for that.
Yeah.
And the people who think that that's some sort of outlandish way to be, I invite you to go away.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and let's not forget that Roe v. Wade has not been overturned. Roe v. Wade is settled law. And
it's not settled law. That's sketch. I mean, it keeps me up at night. It absolutely.
Me too.
Me too. But you're right, Kevin. It's that is built into our Constitution. Our Constitution's kind of amazing.
It's incredible.
It's a pretty incredible piece of work, especially for the time that it was written. It was very forward thinking. We have bodily autonomy built right into that. So if we protect our Constitution and the Roe v. Wade gets overturned, we are good in Montana.
Right.
And that's what we're working towards. That cannot get overturned.
Yeah. So let's just wrap up a little bit with, thank you both for coming on. We were going to have
having us.
1 hour here, and I would love to have you back anytime. I'm trying to make sure that we get a chance to talk to more Montanans, that we get out in front of them, because one of the things that I really dislike is all the people that do the whole, I'm not hearing anything from the Democrats. We've been here.
Right, so, we're right here.
And you can see it. I'm going to put this up because it's another thing from Karsten, who has been a joy. I used to work as a victims advocate. The youngest pregnant child was 5. The youngest I worked with was 8. That is terrifying. That's just mind-blowing that any of this stuff still happens.
Yeah.
Karsten, thank you for being one of those people who can work in those situations and help fix some of the things that were going on. And try to advocate for them for a better life, because we absolutely have to be doing that, and we need to be making sure that people are safe.
Karsten, where are you? You're in Kalispell? Where'd she say she was?
Yes, in the Flathead. I don't know about Kalispell.
Okay.
So, licensed educator and sub in the Forest District in Flathead. So,
okay.
Karsten, thank you for joining us tonight. I think that's awesome. Yeah, Kalispell is what you just said.
Good to hear from you, Karsten.
We're looking. I'm just pulling Billings volunteers left and right. So if you were like within 20 miles, I was like gonna say, come on down. But Kalispell's a bit of a drive.
Yeah. So once again, for anybody who is out there who hasn't stepped up to join one of our campaigns, we're all looking for help. Both Jake and I have primaries. Jenna is fighting an uphill battle in Billings, and you know what? We're all fighting an uphill battle because everything went red last cycle. And I don't know if you know this, but it hasn't been good since they won. So let's kind of fix that. So if you're looking to volunteer, you can reach out to us. Jenna, where is your campaign located online? How can they get hold of you?
You can just email me, just jenna4mt@gmail.com. You can follow me on social media. But yeah, I'm out here in Yellowstone County. We are doing, Jenna FOR, not FO, not the number, FORMT.com @gmail.com. But if you are looking to volunteer at all in Yellowstone, it doesn't have to be for me, because we've got a great group of candidates out here in Yellowstone, and we're all working our tails off and working together. So if you just want to, if you're in Yellowstone County or in and around the area, get a hold of me, because we have stuff for you to do, and we will welcome any help in all forms.
And please send Jenna money.
You know what?
Campaigns don't run without money.
If you have it, send it. But if you don't, because you're in a situation like a lot of us, don't worry about it. Literally just send me an email, and we've got stuff for you to do. I know how to fundraise in other ways. Don't worry. It's if you don't have money to send, don't think that you can't help, because I will use you in a different way. Get a hold of me.
Right. And Jake, yours is troyer4mt@gmail.com. Is that correct?
It is. Right? And people can also call me directly, 406-202-1062. Give me a call, shoot me a text. I also have
1062.
1062.
I am putting it in so people can
The
see
same
it.
number you have. And
No, but that would require me to look it up.
I know. But and then you can also look at my website, TroyerFromMontanaSpelledOut.com. And check out our social media too. I post videos when I'm on doors and try and keep it a little lively. So check us out there too. But Kevin, Jenna, it's really been an honor and a privilege to sit with both of you today. It's we had a
Me
great
too.
and Jenna, I am so excited for you and your race. Like, this is great news. And Kev, of course, I'm excited for you too.
I'm
Well, thank
excited.
you.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
And after this, I'll be heading over to Sophie's softball game. So it's
Cool.
it's a good night for it.
Perfect.
All right. Well, everybody, thank you for joining us. It was a really good conversation. I hope you guys will come back again. I hope the two of you will be back.
Whenever you want, Kev.
Yep.
And I'd like to have more of these. The thing is that every time we get a chance to talk to people, they don't always watch it right away, but they do get to watch them later on, and it's really good for everybody to step in. Karsten giving us all a good luck. We appreciate
Thanks,
that,
Karsten.
And so I think that's it. I'm gonna throw up our little graphic because we're ending the show. I'm gonna stop the stream. Stay on for just a minute, you two, if you wouldn't mind. And